The fluorescent light above our kitchen table flickered as Emma slammed her organic chemistry textbook shut, the sound echoing through our cramped Pearl District studio like a judge's gavel delivering a final verdict. I looked up from my bowl of instant ramen, the same brand I'd been eating for dinner every night for the past 6 months, because it was all we could afford on my warehouse salary. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus, we need to talk, she said, her voice carrying that particular tone that made my stomach drop faster than a failed exam grade. The tone that meant I was about to hear something I didn't want to hear, but something she'd been holding back for weeks. I set down my plastic spoon, watching the sodium-laden broth ripple in the bowl. Outside our single window, Portland's evening, rain tapped against the glass like an impatient landlord demanding rent we barely managed to scrape together each month. The studio apartment that had once felt cozy when we first moved in together now felt suffocating, packed with Emma's medical textbooks, my work uniforms hanging on a makeshift clothesline, and the constant reminder that we were just 2 kids, trying to make it in a city that seemed designed to chew up dreams and spit them out. "What's wrong now?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would be about money, about my job, about the future that seemed to stretch endlessly before us like an interstate highway leading nowhere. Ma pushed her long, dark hair behind her ears, a nervous habit she'd developed during her most stressful study sessions. Her laptop was still open to her Stanford University application portal, the same screen she'd been staring at obsessively for months, refreshing it every few hours like it might magically change from application under review to congratulations. "Look around us, Marcus," she said, gesturing at our tiny living space. "Look at where we are. Look at where we're going." I followed her gaze across our studio. The Murphy bed that doubled as our couch during the day was unmade, sheets tangled from another restless night where Emma tossed and turned, stressed about her upcoming MCAT retake. My Pacific Logistics uniform hung on the bathroom door, still, smelling faintly of cardboard and industrial cleaning supplies. Kitchen consisted of a hot plate, a mini fridge that made concerning humming noises, and a sink full of dishes I'd been too exhausted to wash after pulling another double shift. "I see 2 people working hard to build something together," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, they felt hollow. I'd been saying variations of the same thing for months, and each time it sounded less convincing. Emma's eyes, usually warm and encouraging, had taken on that distant look I'd been seeing more frequently. The look she got when she was calculating. Something in her head, not organic chemistry formulas or anatomy diagrams, but something much more personal and infinitely more painful. "Marcus, be honest with me. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" The question hung in the air between us like smoke. It was the kind of question that career counselors asked, that job interviewers posed, that parents brought up at family dinners. Coming from Emma, sitting in our cramped apartment with her pre-med textbooks scattered around us like evidence of ambition, I felt more like an accusation. "I see myself with you," I said automatically. "That's not what I mean, and you know it." She closed her laptop with a soft click. "I mean career-wise, goal-wise, future-wise." I spooned another mouthful of ramen, buying time while my mind raced through possible answers. The truth was complicated, layered with late-night study sessions she didn't know about, online courses I'd been taking after my warehouse shifts, and applications I'd submitted in secret. But how could I explain any of that without sounding like I was making excuses or building castles in the air? "I'm figuring it out," I said finally. "Marcus, you've been figuring it out for 2 years. Emma's voice carried a frustration that had been building like pressure in a steam engine. "I'm not trying to be cruel, but I need to know we're moving in the same direction. I'm applying to medical school. I'm working toward something specific, something challenging, something that matters." The implication stung more than she probably intended. While she studied for the MCAT and researched residency programs, I loaded trucks and scanned barcodes. While she networked with professors and joined pre-med study groups, I came home smelling like warehouse dust and too tired to have conversations about anything more complex than what to order for dinner. "And you don't think what I do matters?" I asked. Emma's expression softened slightly, but not enough to erase the doubt I could see behind her eyes. Your job matters, Marcus. You work hard, and I respect that. But it's not a career. It's not building toward anything. She was right, and that was the most frustrating part. Pacific Logistics wasn't my dream job, wasn't anybody's dream. Job. It was a paycheck that covered half our rent and kept instant ramen on the table. It was a placeholder. It's a temporary solution that had somehow become permanent through the simple passage of time and the grinding necessity of survival. I know you're smart, Emma continued, her voice gentler now, but somehow more devastating. I know you're capable of more than loading trucks all night. But wanting something to happen and making it happen are two completely different things. I watched the rain streak down our window, creating abstract patterns that blurred the city lights beyond. Each droplet seemed to carry a piece of my pride with it as it slid toward the windowsill. Emma wasn't being mean. She was being practical. Realistic, the kind of forward thinking that would probably make her an excellent doctor someday. But practicality felt like a knife when it cut through the dreams you'd been nursing in private. So what are you saying? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded on the table. When she finally spoke, her words came out carefully measured, like she'd been rehearsing them. I'm saying that if Stanford accepts me, I'm going. With or without you. The words landed with the weight of an ultimatum, even though she hadn't meant them that way. I could see it in her face. She wanted me to argue, to present a plan, to show her some evidence that I was working toward something bigger than night shifts and instant meals. She wanted me to prove her wrong. But how could I tell her about the acceptance letter I'd been carrying in my wallet for 3 weeks? How could I explain that while she'd been worrying about our future? I'd already secured my nandhers in ways she couldn't imagine. The conversation that followed stretched well past midnight, circling around the same central question like water spiraling down a drain. Emma talked about opportunities, about potential, about the importance of having goals that extended beyond paying next month's rent. I found myself nodding along, offering vague reassurances that felt increasingly empty with each repetition. By the time we finally went to bed, the tension between us had crystallized into something solid and uncomfortable, like a stone lodged in the foundation of our relationship. Emma fell asleep quickly, exhausted from another day of classes and studying, but I lay awake listening to the rain and thinking about the Stanford acceptance letter hidden in my work jacket pocket. 3 weeks earlier, I'd received the call while I was on my lunch break at the warehouse. Dr. Williams from the admissions office had congratulated me on my acceptance to Stanford's graduate program in bioengineering, praising my exceptional academic preparation despite unconventional circumstances, and noting that my research proposal on sustainable medical device manufacturing had impressed the selection committee. I'd sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at the email confirmation. On my phone screen, feeling a mixture of elation and disbelief that made my hands shake. After 2 years of secret night classes at Portland Community College, online courses in advanced mathematics and chemistry, and weekends spent in the library while Emma thought I was picking up extra shifts, I'd actually done it. I'd gotten into the same university that Emma dreamed about attending, a program that would not only secure our financial future, but also put me in a position to contribute meaningfully to the medical field she was so passionate about. But instead of celebrating, I'd found myself paralyzed by a question I hadn't anticipated. When should I tell her? The easy answer was immediately, that very evening. But something had held me back. Maybe it was the fear that she wouldn't believe me, that she'd think I was making it up to win an argument about our future. Maybe it was the knowledge that my acceptance was still contingent on completing my final 2 prerequisite courses over the summer. Or maybe if I was being completely honest with myself, it was the desire to see how much faith she really had in me when she thought I had nothing to offer but good intentions and a strong work ethic. That decision to wait had cost me dearly over the past 3 weeks. Every conversation about our future felt like a performance where I had to pretend to be less than I was. Every expression of doubt from Emma cut deeper because I knew I could erase it with 4 words. I got into Stanford. But each day that passed made the revelation feel more complicated. More like a betrayal of the trust that should exist between partners who were supposedly building a life together. lying in the darkness with Emma sleeping beside me. I realized that my secret had transformed from a surprise into a lie of omission. Tomorrow was Friday, which meant I had another weekend of pretending to be the directionless boyfriend she was increasingly frustrated with. Monday would bring another week of warehouse shifts and stolen moments of studying that I had to hide like evidence of a crime. The rain had stopped, but the silence felt even heavier than the storm. In 6 hours, my alarm would wake me for another day of maintaining a fiction that was becoming harder to sustain. But maybe, I thought, as sleep finally began to claim me, it was time to stop protecting Emma from the truth about who I was becoming, even if that truth might complicate the story she'd been telling herself about our relationship. After all, some surprises were worth the risk of changing everything. 3 years earlier, I had been standing in the gymnasium of Portland Community College, surrounded by folding tables draped with college banners and career fair displays that promised bright futures to anyone willing to work for them. The air smelled like industrial coffee and the nervous energy of students trying to figure out their next steps after high school graduation. I wasn't supposed to be there. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My original plan after graduating from Franklin High had been to take a gap year, work full-time at my uncle's auto repair shop, save money for community college classes that I'd start the following fall. But my guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, had practically dragged me to the career fair during my lunch break from the shop, insisting that I needed to explore my options while they were still open. The truth was, I felt lost. My grades had been decent, mostly B's with the occasional A in math and science, but I wasn't the kind of student who had college recruiters calling my house or scholarship offers filling my mailbox. My parents had immigrated from Taiwan when I was 8, and while they'd always emphasized education, they also understood the practical reality of working-class life in America. Dreams were luxury items we couldn't quite afford. I was examining a brochure for a 2-year electrical technician program when I heard someone crying softly behind me. Not the dramatic sobbing that draws attention, but the quiet, controlled kind of tears that people shed when they're trying not to let anyone see them fall apart. I turned around and saw her sitting alone at a table that had been abandoned by whatever organization had been recruiting there earlier. She was wearing a Portland State University sweatshirt that looked too big for her frame, and her dark hair fell like a curtain around her face as she stared down at a rejection letter in her hands. Emma Rodriguez was not someone I knew personally, but I recognized her from Franklin High. She'd been valedictorian of our graduating class, a girl who always had her hand up in AP classes, who organized study groups and tutored struggling students during lunch breaks. Seeing her cry over what appeared to be a college rejection felt like watching a fundamental law of the universe break down. "Hey," I said, approaching her table cautiously. "Are you okay?" She looked up quickly, wiping her eyes with the back of her sleeve. Up close, I could see that her face was flushed with embarrassment rather than just sadness. "Hi, Marcus. I'm fine, just having a moment." The fact that she knew my name surprised me. We'd shared exactly one class together, AP Chemistry, during senior year, but I'd always assumed I was invisible to someone operating at her academic level. I gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" Emma nodded, folding the rejection letter and sliding it into her backpack like evidence she wanted to hide. "I probably look ridiculous crying at a career fair." "Not ridiculous," I said, "just human." She managed a small smile at that. "I had this whole plan mapped out, you know. Get into Oregon Health and Science University's pre-med program, maintain A4, 0 GPA, score in the 95th percentile on the MCAT, apply to top medical schools. I've been planning this since I was 14. Let me guess." I said, "OHS? You said no?" Emma pulled the letter back out and smoothed it on the table between us. "Waitlisted," which is basically a polite way of saying maybe if everyone else dies or changes their mind. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My parents are going to be devastated. I've been telling everyone in our neighborhood about their daughter who's going to be a doctor." I read over the letter, noting the formal language that college admissions offices use to crush dreams while maintaining plausible deniability. "What's your backup plan?" "Portland State for now, I guess. It's not what I wanted, but I can do my prerequisites there and reapply next year." She gestured around the gymnasium. That's actually why I'm here, trying to figure out how to make the best of Plan B. Something about her determination, even in the face of disappointment, struck me as remarkable. Most people I knew, myself included, seemed to drift from one decision to the next without much of a plan at all. Emma had been disappointed by one setback, but she was already strategizing her next move. You know, I said, my chemistry teacher always said that the best doctors aren't necessarily the ones who get into medical school on their first try. They're the ones who want it badly enough to keep trying, even when the path gets complicated. Emma studied my face, as if trying to determine whether I was being sincere or just offering empty comfort. Did your chemistry teacher actually say that, or are you making it up to make me feel better? Complete fabrication, I admitted. But it sounds like something a wise person would say, doesn't it? This time her laugh was genuine, and I felt something shift in the air between us. Not attraction exactly, but a recognition of shared honesty that felt rare and valuable. What about you? She asked. What's your grand plan for conquering the world? I gestured at the community college brochures scattered across the table, still figuring that out. I'm thinking about starting with some general education classes and seeing what clicks. Maybe engineering, maybe computer science, maybe nothing at all. That's refreshingly honest, Emma said. Most people at these things pretend they have everything figured out. We spent the next hour walking around the career fair together, stopping at booths that interested either of us and comparing notes on different programs and opportunities. Emma approached each conversation with the kind of systematic thoroughness I'd expected from her. Asking detailed questions about prerequisites, graduation rates, and career outcomes, I found myself paying more attention than I usually did. Partly because her enthusiasm was contagious, and partly because I was genuinely curious about her perspective on everything. When we reached the Portland Community College table, the recruiter handed us information about their science and pre-health programs. We have excellent transfer agreements with four-year universities, she explained to Emma. Many of our students complete their first 2 years here and then transfer to OHSU or Portland State with significant cost savings. Emma's eyes lit up as she read through the materials. This could actually work better than I thought, she said to me as we walked away from the table. Smaller class sizes, more individualized attention from professors, and I could save money while maintaining YGPA. Plus, I added, you wouldn't be the only person there trying to figure things out. Sounds like it might be less pressure than jumping straight into a competitive pre-med program. She stopped walking and turned to face me. Marcus, can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you come talk to me earlier? I mean, we barely know each other. I thought about how to answer that honestly. You looked like someone who could use a friend. And I guess I was curious about what could make the smartest person in our graduating class cry at a career fair. You think I'm the smartest person in our class? I think you're the most determined person I've ever met, I said. Which is probably more valuable than just being smart. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this. You know what's funny? I've been so focused on following my plan exactly that I never considered that maybe the detour could be better than the original route. Sometimes the scenic route teaches you things you wouldn't learn on the highway, I said. She smiled. Did your chemistry teacher say that too? Nope, that one was my uncle. He's full of automotive wisdom that somehow applies to everything else in life. By the time the career fair ended, we'd exchanged phone numbers and made tentative plans to visit Portland Community College together the following week. Emma seemed lighter somehow, as if sharing her disappointment and discovering new possibilities had lifted a weight she'd been carrying alone. Thank you, she said as we walked toward the parking lot. I came here feeling like my life was falling apart, and now I actually feel optimistic about next year. Thank you for letting me tag along, I replied. I learned more about college in the past 2 hours than I had in the previous 6 months. As I drove home that afternoon, I found myself thinking about Emma's systematic approach to problem solving and her resilience in the face of setbacks. I'd always admired smart, driven people from a distance, assuming they inhabited a different world than someone like me. But our conversation had revealed that even the most accomplished people struggled with uncertainty and self-doubt. Over the following weeks, Emma and I began spending more time together. initially under the pretense of research and planning for college, but gradually expanding into genuine friendship. She helped me navigate the maze of prerequisite requirements and degree pathways, while I offered perspective from someone who wasn't driven by a specific career goal but was genuinely curious about learning. What started as study sessions in the Portland State Library evolved into long conversations over coffee, walks through the park where we debated everything from science, ethics, to our favorite movies, and eventually, the kind of easy companionship that made both of us realize we'd been looking for someone exactly like each other without knowing it. The transition from friendship to romance happened gradually, then all at once. One evening in late summer, while we were reviewing course catalogs and planning our fall schedules, Emma looked up from her notebook and said, "I think I'm falling in love with you, and I'm not sure if that's going to complicate everything or make everything better." "Probably both," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "But I think it's worth finding out." She squeezed my fingers gently. I never expected to meet someone who would make me excited about Plan B. Looking back now, lying in our cramped studio apartment 3 years later, I realized that Emma had been right about Plan B being better than the original route. Meeting her had fundamentally changed not just my romantic life, but my entire approach to education and career planning. Her determination had inspired me to set higher goals for myself, while my encouragement had helped her recover from early setbacks and find confidence in unconventional paths. But somewhere along the way, our roles had crystallized in ways that neither of us had anticipated. Emma had become the ambitious partner with clear goals and impressive achievements, while I had become the supportive boyfriend whose own aspirations seemed secondary to hers. The dynamic that had felt balanced and complementary in the beginning now felt increasingly lopsided, with Emma pulling ahead while I appeared to be standing still. If only she knew that, while she'd been worrying about our future diverging, I'd been working toward a convergence that would surprise us both. The warehouse floor at Pacific Logistics stretched out before me like an ocean of concrete and fluorescent lights, punctuated by towering shelves that disappeared into the shadows of the ceiling 40 feet above. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday night, and I was alone, except for the security guard making his rounds and the occasional rumble of freight trucks pulling into the loading bays. This was my thinking time, the hours when my hands moved automatically through the familiar routine of scanning packages, organizing shipments, and loading delivery trucks, while my mind worked through problems that had nothing to do with logistics or inventory management. Tonight, those problems felt more urgent than usual. I pulled Emma's words from our conversation the night before out of my mental filing cabinet, examined them again under the harsh warehouse lighting. "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" The question hadn't been casual small talk or idle curiosity. It had been an interview, a test, a final attempt to find some evidence that I was worth investing her future in. The worst part was that I understood her perspective completely. From where Emma sat, I was a 21-year-old community college graduate working the night shift at a warehouse, dating someone who was clearly destined for bigger things. I drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic with a passenger door that only opened from the inside. I wore the same 3 pairs of work pants in rotation because buying new clothes felt irresponsible when we were already stretching every dollar to cover rent and groceries. I came home exhausted and covered in dust, while she stayed up until midnight studying organic chemistry and practicing for the MCAT. But what Emma couldn't see, what I'd been carefully hiding for almost 2 years, was the second life I'd been building in the margins of my warehouse shifts and weekend hours. The acceptance letter in my wallet was just the culmination of a project that had started the semester after we'd met, when her passion for medicine had sparked something in me that I'd never experienced before. A genuine desire to contribute to something larger than myself. I remembered the exact moment when my academic direction had crystallized. Emma and I had been studying together in the Portland State Library during our second semester of community college, working on separate assignments, but sharing the quiet companionship that had become the foundation of our relationship. She was reading about cardiac surgery techniques, while I struggled through a statistics homework assignment that felt pointless and abstract. "Look at this," she had said, sliding her textbook across the table so I could see a diagram of an artificial heart valve. "Isn't it incredible? This tiny piece of engineering can save someone's life." I'd studied the diagram, noting the precise angles and materials specifications listed in the margins. Oh, wow. How do they manufacture something like this? The tolerances must be incredibly tight. Emma had looked up from her notes with surprise. I never thought about the manufacturing side. I was just thinking about the surgical procedure. That conversation had led to 3 hours of research where we'd fallen down a rabbit hole of biomedical engineering articles, exploring the intersection between medicine and manufacturing technology. Emma approached it from the clinical side, asking questions about patient outcomes and surgical complications. While I found myself fascinated by the materials, science, and precision, engineering required to create devices that could function reliably inside the human body. By the end of that evening, I discovered that bioengineering existed as a field, that Stanford had one of the most prestigious programs in the country, and that the work being done there could revolutionize medical treatment in ways that would directly support Emma's future career as a physician. That night, I'd started researching prerequisite courses and admission requirements with the same systematic approach that Emma brought to her medical school planning. But unlike Emma, who shared every step of her academic journey with me, I kept my investigations private, partly because I wasn't sure if my interest was genuine or just an extension of my feelings for her, partly because I wanted to prove to myself that I could succeed at something challenging before I announced my intentions to the world. The math requirements alone had seemed insurmountable at first. Calculus through differential equations, linear algebra, advanced statistics, and mathematical modeling. My community college mathematics background ended with college algebra, which meant I'd need to complete nearly 2 years of additional coursework just to be eligible for upper division engineering classes. But working nights at the warehouse had given me something valuable: time and schedule, flexibility that day shift workers didn't have. While Emma attended classes and study groups during regular hours, I was free to enroll in morning and afternoon mathematics courses. While she spent evenings reviewing lecture notes and preparing for exams, I worked through problem sets and attended supplemental instruction sessions. The physics and chemistry requirements had been equally demanding but more familiar territory. My AP classes in high school had provided a foundation. Emma's study materials gave me access to advanced resources that would have been expensive to purchase on my own. I discovered that studying alongside someone pursuing medical school had unexpected benefits. The rigor required for MAC preparation far exceeded what I needed for introductory engineering courses. The most challenging aspect hadn't been the academic work itself, but maintaining the deception that allowed me to pursue it. Every study session required careful scheduling to avoid conflicts with time Emma expected me to be available. Every exam meant finding excuses for why I couldn't meet her for lunch or dinner. Every successful grade represented progress toward a goal I couldn't share with the person who mattered most to me. I'd become an expert at hiding textbooks under my car seat, studying during break times at work, and completing assignments during the hours when Emma assumed I was sleeping off my night shifts. The deception felt justified because it was temporary. I told myself I'd reveal everything once I had something concrete to show for my efforts. But as months turned into semesters and semesters accumulated into years, the secret had grown heavier rather than easier to carry. Felt hollow because I couldn't celebrate it with Emma. Each milestone toward my ultimate goal created more distance between us rather than bringing us closer together. The Stanford application process had been the most elaborate deception yet. Letters of recommendation from professors who knew me only as Marcus, the quiet student who asks thoughtful questions during office hours. Personal statements written during my lunch breaks and revised in 20-minute increments between work tasks. Research proposals developed through stolen hours in computer labs and late-night sessions in 24-hour libraries. When the acceptance call had come 3 weeks ago, I'd been sitting in my car during my dinner break, eating a gas station sandwich and reviewing notes for my final course in organic chemistry. Dr. Williams had congratulated me on my admission to Stanford's bioengineering graduate program, specifically mentioning my research proposal on sustainable manufacturing techniques for medical implants. Your academic record shows exactly the kind of interdisciplinary thinking we value in our program, she had said. Starting with community college and working your way through prerequisite courses while maintaining employment demonstrates the kind of persistence we look for in graduate students. I'd thanked her professionally, confirmed my intention to accept the offer, and hung up the phone. Then I'd sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the acceptance email on my phone screen and feeling a mixture of elation and terror that made my hands shake. The elation was obvious I'd achieved something that had seemed impossible when I'd started down this path. The terror was more complex. How do you tell your girlfriend that you've been living a double life for 2 years? How do you explain that while she's been worrying about your lack of ambition, you've been secretly working toward admission to her dream university? How do you admit that you'd kept it secret, not because you didn't trust her support, but because you'd wanted to prove you could succeed without it? Now, standing alone in the warehouse at nearly 3 a.m., I realized that my success had created a problem I hadn't anticipated. The longer I waited to tell Emma, the more my achievement felt like a betrayal of the honesty that had always defined our relationship. But the more I considered telling her, the more I worried that she'd see my secret as evidence that I didn't trust her judgment or value her opinion. The truth was more complicated than either interpretation. I'd kept my academic work secret because I'd needed to know that my motivation was genuine rather than just an attempt to keep pace with her accomplishments. I'd needed to prove to myself that I could commit to something difficult and follow through without external validation or encouragement. But that self-reliance had come at the cost of intimacy with the person I loved most. Emma's frustration with my apparent lack of direction wasn't unfair. It was based on incomplete information that I'd deliberately withheld from her. Her doubts about our future compatibility weren't unreasonable. They were the logical conclusion any rational person would draw from the evidence I'd allowed her to see. I finished loading the last delivery truck and checked my watch. For 15 a.m., in 3 hours, Emma would wake up for her morning classes. We'd share another strained breakfast conversation where she tried to hide her disappointment and pretended not to notice her growing distance. But maybe it was time to stop pretending. Maybe it was time to trust that the woman who'd seen potential in me, when I couldn't see it in myself, would understand why. I'd needed to pursue this goal independently. Maybe it was time to bet our entire relationship on the possibility that some secrets were worth keeping until they could be revealed as gifts rather than confessions. I clocked out and walked to my car, pulling the Stanford acceptance letter from my wallet one more time. Tomorrow evening, Emma had plans to meet with her pre-med study group at Grind Coffee on Burnside Street. It was their weekly session, too. Review practice MCAT questions and discuss medical school application strategies. I knew because I'd been invited to join them several times. Invitations I'd declined because I claimed I wouldn't fit in with such an academically focused group. The irony hadn't been lost on me then, and it felt even sharper now. But maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe it was time to stop hiding and start building the future we both wanted together. Grind Coffee on Burnside Street buzzed with the kind of energy that only came from college students fueled by caffeine and academic anxiety. The afternoon crowd filled every table, laptops open and textbooks stacked like fortresses around their owners. The air carried the rich aroma of espresso mixed with the subtle stress hormones of people preparing for exams that would determine their futures. I stood outside the large front window, watching Emma's study group through the glass like an anthropologist observing a foreign culture. She sat at their usual corner table with 4 other pre-med students, surrounded by MCAT prep books, highlighted notes, and the kind of intense focus that made the rest of the cafe seem to fade into background noise. Emma wore her lucky purple sweater, the one she always chose for important study sessions. And her hair was pulled back in the messy bun that meant she was deep in concentration mode. Next to her, Ashley Park flipped through flashcards with the rapid-fire efficiency of someone who'd memorized half the human anatomy, while the other members of their group worked through practice problems with the methodical precision of future doctors. This was Emma's world, serious, competitive, filled with people who spoke fluently in scientific terminology and shared the common goal of healing others. For 2 years, I'd declined invitations to join these study sessions, claiming I'd feel out of place among such accomplished students. The truth was more complicated. I hadn't felt out of place because of intellectual inadequacy. I'd felt out of place because I couldn't participate honestly without revealing the academic work I'd been hiding. Now standing on the sidewalk with my hands shoved deep in my jacket pockets, I wondered if my absence from these sessions had contributed to Emma's perception that I lacked academic ambition. While she spent hours each week surrounded by motivated peers discussing their shared future in medicine, I remained an outsider looking in, apparently content with my warehouse job and instant noodle dinners. I pushed through the coffee shop door, the bell above it, announcing my arrival with a cheerful chime that felt inappropriately optimistic given the gravity of what I was about to do. Several heads turned in my direction, including Emma's, and I saw surprise flash across her face before being replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like embarrassment. "Marcus," she said, half rising from her chair. "What are you doing here?" The question wasn't hostile, but it carried an undercurrent of confusion that made the other study group members glance between us with obvious curiosity. I realized that my unexpected appearance had disrupted not just Emma's concentration, but the entire dynamic of their academic sanctuary. "I was hoping we could talk," I said, trying to project confidence, despite feeling like an intruder in a space where I didn't belong. "But I can wait until you're finished if this isn't a good time." Ashley looked up from her flashcards with the kind of polite smile people use when they're not sure if they should excuse themselves from an awkward situation. "We were just working through some organic chemistry problems. Nothing that can't wait if you two need to discuss something." "No, really, I don't want to interrupt," I said, though every fiber of my being wanted to grab Emma's hand and pull her outside before I lost my nerve entirely. "This is important, but your studying comes first." Emma's expression softened slightly at this acknowledgement of her priorities, but I could see uncertainty in her eyes. Our conversation from the night before hung between us like unfinished business, and I suspected she was wondering if I'd come to continue arguing about our future or to concede defeat in the face of her practical concerns. "Actually," said David, one of the other pre-med students whose name I'd learned from Emma's casual mentions, "we're pretty much wrapped up for today. We've been at this for 3 hours, and I think we've reached the point of diminishing returns." The group began packing up their materials with the efficient movements of people who'd performed this routine countless times. Emma stacked her notes carefully, placing them in the color-coded folders that kept her entire academic life organized and accessible. Watching her methodical approach to something as simple as cleaning up after a study session reminded me of all the reasons I'd fallen in love with her determination and attention to detail. "I'll walk with you to the Max station," Ashley said to Emma, shouldering her backpack. "Unless you're staying here to talk with Marcus." Emma glanced at me, and I could see her weighing options in real time. Part of her clearly wanted the safety and predictability of her established routine: ride the train home with Ashley, review her notes one more time before dinner, maintain the careful schedule that kept her academic life on track. But another part of her seemed curious about why I'd sought her out in the middle of her study session, especially given the tension that had been building between us for weeks. "Go ahead," Emma said to Ashley. "I'll catch the next train." As her study group filtered out of the coffee shop, exchanging final reminders about upcoming exams and weekend review sessions, Emma and I found ourselves alone at the corner table that still bore the evidence of serious academic work. I slid into the chair that David had vacated, suddenly aware that I was occupying a space normally reserved for people with clear medical school aspirations and impressive GPAs. "So," Emma said, her voice carefully neutral, "what's so important? That it couldn't wait until I got home?" I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the familiar texture of the Stanford acceptance letter, now worn soft from weeks of handling. The paper felt heavier than it should have, weighted with implications that would either repair our relationship or destroy it entirely. "There's something I need to tell you," I began, "and I should have told you a long time ago." Emma leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms in a posture that suggested she was preparing herself for disappointment. "Okay, I'm listening." "Emma, I know you think I don't have any direction or ambition. I know it looks like I'm content to work at the warehouse forever while you pursue your dreams of becoming a doctor." I paused, struggling to find words that would convey the complexity of what I'd been doing without sounding defensive or self-aggrandizing. "But that's not the whole truth." "What do you mean?" she asked, though something in her tone suggested she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. The answer? I pulled the acceptance letter from my pocket and placed it on the table between us, folded so that only the Stanford letterhead was visible. Emma's eyes immediately focused on the university logo, and I watched her expression shift from confusion to something approaching alarm. For the past 2 years, I said, while you've been working toward medical school, I've been taking courses and preparing for graduate school applications. Advanced mathematics, physics, chemistry, bioengineering, prerequisites. Emma stared at the letter without reaching for it. I don't understand. And where? Why didn't you tell me? Morning classes while you were in your afternoon labs. Evening courses after my warehouse shifts. Online programs during my breaks at work. I gestured toward the letter. Applied to Stanford's bioengineering program, Emma, and they accepted me. The silence that followed felt like the moment between lightning and thunder. When you know the sound is coming, but you can't predict exactly when it will arrive or how loud it will be. Emma's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been anger. You've been taking classes for 2 years, she said slowly, and you never mentioned it once? I wanted to be sure I could succeed before I told anyone. I didn't want to announce plans that I might not be able to follow through on. The explanation sounded reasonable in my head, but speaking it aloud made it sound weak and inadequate. Emma finally reached for the letter, unfolding it with the careful movements of someone handling evidence in a crime scene. Her eyes scanned the formal congratulations, the program details, the scholarship information that I'd been too nervous to process fully when I'd first read it. Bioengineering, she said without looking up from the letter. Medical device development. I thought about what you said that night in the library about the artificial heart valve. I started researching the engineering side of medical technology. I realized there was an entire field dedicated to creating the tools that doctors like you will use to save lives. She folded the letter and set it back on the table, but she didn't push it toward me or away from her. Instead, she stared at it as if it might transform into something else if she looked at it long enough. 2 years, Marcus. Right. 2 years of lying to me about what you were doing with your time. Wasn't lying exactly. You were absolutely lying. Her voice remained quiet, but there was an edge to it that I'd never heard before. Every time I asked about your future plans, every time I worried about us growing apart academically, every time I felt guilty for pursuing something you seemed to have no interest in, you were lying. The weight of her words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on the positive surprise of my achievement that I hadn't fully considered how my secrecy would feel like a betrayal of the trust we'd built together. Emma, I know how this looks, but I need you to understand why I did it this way. I needed to know that my motivation was genuine, that I wasn't just trying to keep up with you or prove something to you. I needed to know I could commit to something difficult and follow through on my own. She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face as if trying to determine whether I was still hiding something from her. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Do you have any idea how many nights I stayed awake worrying that we were becoming incompatible? How many times I questioned whether I was being selfish for pursuing my dreams when it seemed like you didn't have any dreams of your own? The pain in her voice made my chest tighten with a guilt that was sharper than anything I'd experienced before. In trying to protect myself from potential failure, I'd inflicted a different kind of suffering on the person I loved most. I'm sorry, I said, though the words felt inadequate. I'm so sorry, Emma. I thought I was protecting both of us, but I see now that I was just protecting myself. Emma picked up the acceptance letter again, reading through it more carefully. This time, Stanford, she said finally. The same university I've been dreaming about for medical school, the same university, I confirmed. If you get accepted to their medical program, we could both be there. We could build our careers in the same place, working toward the same goal from different angles. For the first time since I'd sat down, Emma's expression showed something other than hurt or anger. She looked thoughtful, calculating, as if she was trying to solve a complex equation in her head. Show me your transcript, she said suddenly. What? If you've been taking advanced courses for 2 years, you must have a transcript. Show me your grades. I pulled out my phone and navigated to the student portal where my academic record was stored. Emma studied the screen, scrolling through 2 years of mathematics, physics, and chemistry courses, noting the consistent pattern of A's and B's that had made my Stanford application competitive. Differential equations, she murmured. Physical. Chemistry, materials science. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Marcus, some of these courses are harder than what I'm taking for pre-med. I had good motivation, I said. Wanted to understand the science behind the medicine you're going to practice. Emma handed my phone back to me and leaned forward in her chair, studying my face with the intensity she usually reserved for particularly challenging study problems. I don't know whether to be impressed or furious, she said finally. Both. 2 weeks after our conversation at Grind Coffee, Emma knocked on my apartment door at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I answered in my pajamas, still groggy from another late warehouse shift, to find her standing in the hallway with 2 large coffee cups and an expression that somehow managed to combine excitement with barely contained frustration. Get dressed, she said, pushing past me into the studio. We're taking a trip. Emma, it's 6 in the morning. I just got off work 4 hours ago. She set the coffee cups on our small kitchen table and turned to face me with the kind of determined energy that I'd learned meant resistance was futile. Marcus, do you trust me? Of course I trust you. Then get dressed. We're driving to Palo Alto. The name hit me like cold water. California? Emma, that's a 10-hour drive. I have to work tonight. You called in sick, she said matter-of-factly. I may have used your phone while you were sleeping. Tyler's covering your shift. I stared at her, trying to process the audacity of someone rearranging my life without permission while simultaneously feeling impressed by the thoroughness of her planning. You can't just decide we're driving to Stanford without asking me. Actually, I can, because you've had that acceptance letter in your wallet for 3 weeks and you still haven't visited the campus. Do you know what that tells me? I rubbed my eyes, still struggling to catch up with Emma's early morning energy. What does it tell you? It tells me that part of you still doesn't believe this is real. Part of you is waiting for someone to call and say there's been a mistake, that they didn't mean to accept the warehouse guy who takes night classes. She handed me one of the coffee cups. So we're going to drive down there, walk around campus, maybe sit in on a graduate seminar and make this real for both of us. Emma, I can't just show up at Stanford and expect Dr. Williams is expecting us at 2 o'clock this afternoon, she interrupted. I called her office yesterday and explained that you're having trouble accepting that you belong there. She invited both of us to visit and meet some current graduate students. I took a sip of coffee, using the moment to process what Emma had done. In the span of 24 hours, she had arranged coverage for my work shift, contacted my graduate advisor, and planned a spontaneous road trip to force me to confront the reality of my acceptance. It was classic, Emma systematic, efficient, and completely focused on solving the problem at hand. Why are you doing this? I asked. Emma sat down across from me at our small table, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup like she was drawing warmth from it. Because for the past 2 weeks, you've been apologizing for keeping secrets instead of celebrating one of the biggest achievements of your life. Because you keep talking about Stanford like it's something that happened to someone else instead of something you earned. She was right, though I hadn't realized how obvious my discomfort had been since revealing my acceptance. I'd felt caught between pride in my achievement and shame about the deception that had made it possible. The combination left me feeling like I didn't deserve to celebrate until I'd somehow made amends for the dishonesty. And, Emma continued, because I need to see it too. I need to walk around that campus and imagine both of us there, building careers that complement each other instead of competing. An hour later, we were driving south on Interstate 5 and Emma's reliable Honda Civic, the one with the passenger door that actually opened from both sides. Emma had prepared for the trip with characteristic thoroughness snacks, playlist, printed directions as backup for GPS, and a folder full of research about Stanford's bioengineering program that she'd compiled over the past 2 weeks. I've been reading about the work they're doing in tissue engineering, she said as we passed through the farmland of Oregon's Willamette Valley. Did you know they're developing artificial organs that could eliminate the need for transplant? Waiting lists. Dr. Williams mentioned that in our phone interview. It's one of the reasons I was drawn to their program. Emma glanced at me from the driver's seat. You had a phone interview and didn't tell me. It was the same week as your MCAT retake. I didn't want to add to your stress level. She was quiet for a moment, processing this additional evidence of how much I'd kept hidden from her. Marcus, I know you thought you were protecting me, but sharing good news doesn't add stress. It adds hope. We spent the drive talking through 2 years of parallel academic journeys that we'd never been able to discuss before. Emma told me about the study group sessions where she'd wished I could contribute to conversations about research and career planning. I told her about the late-night problem sets, where I'd wanted to ask for her help with chemistry concepts, but couldn't without revealing what I was working on. The worst part, Emma said as we entered California, wasn't thinking you lacked ambition. It was feeling like I couldn't share my excitement about school with you because it would highlight the differences between us. I felt the same way about my coursework, I admitted. Every time I solved a particularly challenging problem or understood a complex concept, I wanted to tell you about it. But I'd backed myself into a corner where I couldn't share any of it. Stanford's campus unfolded before us like something from a movie about academic excellence. Palm trees lined perfectly maintained walkways, and Spanish-style architecture created an atmosphere that somehow managed to be both historic and cutting-edge. Students moved between buildings with the confident energy of people who knew they belonged at one of the world's most prestigious universities. Dr. Williams met us at the bioengineering building. A woman in her 50s whose handshake conveyed both warmth and authority. Marcus, it's wonderful to finally meet you in person. And Emma, thank you for encouraging him to visit. We find that students who see themselves in our environment tend to have much more successful transitions to graduate school. She led us through laboratories where current students worked on projects that seemed pulled from science fiction, developing neural interfaces, creating biodegradable surgical implants, designing diagnostic devices that could detect diseases at the cellular level. Emma asked technical questions that demonstrated her medical knowledge, while I found myself understanding the engineering principles behind the innovations. This is exactly what I was talking about that night in the library, Emma whispered, as we watched a graduate student demonstrate a prototype heart monitor that could be woven into fabric. Medical technology that could revolutionize patient care. During our meeting with Dr. Williams, she explained the collaborative relationship between Stanford's bioengineering and medical programs. Many of our graduate students work directly with medical school researchers, she said. We found that the best medical devices come from teams that include both engineers who understand the technical constraints and medical professionals who understand clinical needs. So if Emma were accepted to Stanford's medical program, I said we could potentially work on research projects together. Absolutely. In fact, that kind of partnership often produces the most innovative solutions to complex medical challenges. As we walked back across campus in the late afternoon sunlight, Emma slipped her hand into mine. I owe you an apology, she said. You don't owe me anything. I'm the one who kept secrets. I owe you an apology for underestimating you, for seeing your warehouse job as evidence of lack of ambition instead of recognizing it as determination. To support yourself while pursuing something bigger. She squeezed my fingers. I should have known that someone who noticed the engineering behind a heart valve wouldn't be content with a job that didn't challenge him intellectually. We stopped walking near the center of campus, surrounded by students who moved with the easy confidence of people who'd found their place in the world. For the first time since receiving my acceptance letter, I felt like I might belong here too. Emma, there's something else I need to tell you, I said. She tensed slightly, probably wondering what other secrets I'd been keeping. I love you, not because you inspired me to pursue bioengineering, and not because you pushed me to visit Stanford today. I love you because you see potential in people before they see it in themselves, and because you never settle for good enough when great is possible. Emma smiled, the first completely relaxed expression I'd seen from her since our conversation at the coffee shop. I love you too, Marcus. All of you, including the parts you thought you needed to hide from me. 3 months later, we received our letters on the same day. Emma's acceptance to Stanford Medical School arrived in the morning mail, while my official enrollment confirmation came through email that afternoon. We celebrated with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant, eaten at our tiny kitchen table in our cramped studio apartment. planning a future that finally felt like something we were building together instead of separately. Next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.